The golden hues of the setting sun shimmered on the rippling river, casting a serene glow over the secluded bank. The soft rustle of reeds, swaying in the gentle breeze, and the distant hum of cicadas filled the air with an almost meditative calm. 13-year-old Alec crouched near the water, his fishing rod balanced precariously on a rock. This was his refuge, his little slice of peace, away from the chaos of the world. Since his father's tragic death in a factory accident 5 years ago, life had been anything but easy for Alec and his mother, Mia. She worked long shifts as a nurse, barely scraping together enough to keep their modest home intact. The small 2-bedroom house with its peeling wallpaper and creaking floors spoke of a life of struggle. But Mia never let Alec see her despair. She had always told him, "We survive, son. That's what we do." Fishing had become more than a hobby for Alec. It was a lifeline, both for the food it provided and for the moments of solitude it offered. Today, however, the fish seemed uninterested, and the line remained stubbornly still. Alec didn't mind. Sitting by the river, away from the weight of responsibilities, was enough. But peace has a habit of being short-lived. A loud, jarring sound echoed from the nearby bridge, pulling Alec out of his quiet thoughts. He instinctively ducked lower into the reeds, his heart pounding. Peering through the leaves, he saw a black sedan stopped in the middle of the bridge, its sleek body gleaming ominously under the fading sunlight. "What the hell?" Alec whispered to himself, his curiosity outweighing his fear. The car door swung open, and a man in a dark suit stepped out. Even from a distance, Alec could sense the tension in the man's movements. He seemed agitated, his head darting around as if checking for witnesses. Then, to Alec's horror, the man opened the trunk and dragged out another figure, a frail, older man, bound and gagged. Alec's breath hitched as he watched the suited man haul the elderly figure to the edge of the bridge. With one swift motion, he shoved the old man over the railing. The sickening splash that followed sent a chill down Alec's spine. The younger man didn't linger. He slammed the trunk shut, jumped back into the sedan, and sped away, the tires screeching as the car disappeared into the distance. For a moment, Alec was frozen. His mind raced, grappling with what he had just witnessed. Then he saw it, a hand breaking the surface of the water, weakly thrashing before going still. Panic surged through him. Someone was drowning. Someone who had just been left to die. "Do something, Alec," whispered to himself, his voice trembling. His first instinct was to run, to find help, but he quickly realized that by the time he returned with anyone, it might be too late. He had to act now. Kicking off his sneakers, Alec sprinted down the muddy bank, the sharp rocks biting into his bare feet. Without hesitation, he dove into the river. The cold water shocked his system, but he pushed through, his arms and legs flailing against the strong current. The figure was drifting farther downstream, the older man's silver hair barely visible above the churning water. "Hold on!" Alec shouted, though he knew the man couldn't hear him. Each stroke burned his muscles, but he kept going, his determination outweighing the pain. Finally, he reached the man and grabbed him under the arms. The man's limp body was heavier than Alec had anticipated, and the current fought to pull them both under. "No," Alec gritted through clenched teeth. "Not today." Summoning every ounce of strength, he kicked toward the shore, dragging the man with him. His fingers scraped against the muddy bank as he heaved the man onto solid ground. Gasping for air, Alec collapsed beside him, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The world seemed to blur around him, but he forced himself to focus on the man he had just rescued. The older man was in bad shape. His face was pale, his lips tinged with blue, and a deep gash on his temple oozed blood. Alec's stomach churned at the sight, but then he noticed the faint rise and fall of the man's chest. "He's alive," Alec whispered, relief flooding over him. But the man's breathing was shallow, and his body remained motionless. Alec patted his pockets, realizing too late that his phone was back by the fishing rod. The hospital was over an hour away, and there was no time to waste. "I'm taking you home," he decided aloud, more to himself than to the unconscious stranger. The wooden door to Alec's house creaked open as he staggered inside. supporting the man's weight with trembling arms. Mia, still in her scrubs, was in the kitchen, scrubbing a pot when the sound of Alec's footsteps caught her attention. She turned and her eyes widened in shock. "Alec, what on earth? Who is this?" she demanded, rushing over to help him lower the man onto the worn-out sofa. "I found him," Alec panted, his breath ragged. "In the river. Someone threw him off the bridge." Mia's face paled. "What? Are you sure?" "Yes, I saw it happen." Alec's voice cracked with urgency. "Please, Mom, he's hurt. You have to help him." "Son?" Mia hesitated, her nurse's instincts battling with her fear. Finally, she grabbed her first aid kit and knelt beside the man. Her hands moved with practiced precision, checking his pulse and cleaning the gash on his head. "His pulse is weak," she muttered. "He needs stitches, and there are bruises all over his ribs and wrists." "Alec, what exactly happened?" Alec recounted the events as Mia worked, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When he finished, she sat back on her heels, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "This man was left for dead," Mia said quietly, more to herself than to Alec. "Whoever did this will come looking for him. Alec, we've put ourselves in danger."
True?
"We couldn't just leave him there," Alec protested, his voice rising. "What if it were Dad? Would you have left him?" Mia's lips tightened, and she didn't respond immediately. Finally, she sighed. "We'll keep him stable for now, but once he wakes up, we're calling the police." That evening, as the man lay unconscious on a makeshift cot, the old TV flickered in the dimly lit room. Alec poked at his dinner, his appetite gone, while Mia kept a watchful eye on their unexpected guest. The room was tense, the only sound coming from the news anchor's voice on the television. "Breaking news tonight," the anchor announced. "Victor Rhodes, a prominent billionaire and philanthropist, has been reported missing. Authorities believe foul play may be involved, as his car was found abandoned near the Riverway Bridge earlier today." Alec froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Mom," he whispered, his eyes darting to the man on the cot. Mia followed his gaze, her face pale. "It's him," she said, her voice barely audible. "That man in our house. He's Victor Rhodes." Mia and Alec sat in stunned silence, the revelation sinking in. The man lying unconscious on their couch wasn't just anyone. He was a billionaire. A man who had the power to change lives, but had been thrown off a bridge like nothing more than a bag of trash. Mia's heart raced as she tried to process what this meant for them. This wasn't just about helping a stranger anymore. It was bigger than that. Far bigger. Alec broke the silence. "Mom, what do we do now? The people who did this to him, what if they come here looking for him?" Mia stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. Her protective instincts flared, but so did her growing fear. "We need to call someone. The police, the hospital, anyone. Alec, this is way over our heads. But what if they're watching? What if they see him here and come after us before the police can do anything?" Alec's voice was shaking now, his young mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Mia stopped pacing and placed her hands on his shoulders. "Listen to me, Alec. I won't let anything happen to you. Do you understand me? But this is dangerous, and I need to figure out the right move." As she spoke, a low groan interrupted her thoughts. Both Mia and Alec turned sharply toward the man on the couch. His eyes fluttered open and he winced, raising a trembling hand to his bandaged head. Alec rushed to his side. "Hey, you're awake," Alec said, relief evident in his voice. "You're safe. You're in our house." The man's gaze was unfocused, his expression a mixture of confusion and pain. Where? His voice was hoarse and barely audible. "Where am I?" "You're safe," Mia said gently, kneeling beside him. "You were hurt. My son found you and brought you here. Do you remember what happened?" The man blinked, his brows furrowing as he struggled to piece things together. The bridge, the car. His voice cracked and his hand instinctively went to his temple. "They tried to kill me." His words sent a shiver down Mia's spine. It was one thing to suspect what had happened. It was another to hear it confirmed by the victim himself. Who? Mia asked cautiously. Do you remember who did this to you? The man's expression darkened, but he shook his head. I can't. Everything's blurry. He looked at Alec, his gaze softening slightly. You pulled me out. Alec nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell within him, despite the fear still gnawing at his gut. Yeah, I saw what happened, and I couldn't just leave you there. The man's lips quirked into the faintest hint of a smile. Thank you, he murmured. You saved my life. Mia's fear warred with her sense of duty as a nurse and a mother. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the edge of something much larger and more dangerous than they realized. But there was no turning back now. All right, Mia said, standing up. We need to make a plan. You're in no condition to move, and we can't risk drawing attention to ourselves. Alec, keep an eye on him. I'm going to lock all the doors and windows. As the evening wore on, the tension in the house grew thicker. Alec sat by the couch, keeping an eye on their unexpected guest, while Mia prepared a light broth in the kitchen. The man, Victor, dozed fitfully, occasionally muttering incoherent phrases. Alec watched him closely, wondering what kind of life this man must have led to end up as the target of such a brutal attack. Mom, Alec called out softly, what if the people who did this to him are dangerous? Like, really dangerous? Mia appeared in the doorway, her face tight with worry. They probably are, Alec. But that doesn't change the fact that we did the right thing. Now we just need to be smart about how we handle this. Before Alec could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Both Mia and Alec froze, their eyes locking in mutual panic. Mia quickly motioned for Alec to stay quiet as she approached the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Peeking through the curtain, she saw a man in a delivery uniform holding a package. Mia opened the door crack, keeping the chain latched. Can I help you? Package for Mia Parker, the man said, holding up a clipboard. Mia hesitated, glancing at the package. It looked harmless enough, but her instincts screamed at her to be cautious. I didn't order anything, she said firmly. You must have the wrong house. The man frowned, then nodded. All right, sorry for the trouble. He turned and walked back to his van, but Mia didn't relax until he was out of sight. She locked the door and double-checked the windows, her unease growing. Who was it? Alec whispered as she returned to the living room. Delivery guy, Mia said, though she didn't fully believe it herself, but we're not taking any chances. The hours dragged on, and night fell over the small house. The soft hum of the old ceiling fan did little to mask the tension in the room. Mia and Alec took turns watching over Victor, whose condition was improving, but who remained weak and disoriented. Sometime after midnight, Victor stirred again. This time, he seemed more alert, his eyes sharper as they scanned the room. Mia sat beside him, offering him a glass of water. Thank you, he said, his voice stronger now. He drank slowly, then set the glass down. I owe you both my life. And then with pained shuffling of feet, Can you tell us what happened? Mia asked gently. Who did this to you? Victor hesitated, his expression troubled. It was my son-in-law, he admitted finally, his voice laced with bitterness. Alan. He's married to my daughter, Emma. I trusted him. I gave him control of my finances, my foundation, everything. And he betrayed me. Mia frowned, leaning forward. Betrayed you how? Victor's hands trembled slightly as he spoke. I discovered that he'd been embezzling money for years, millions. When I confronted him about it, he snapped, said I was ruining his life, that I was jealous of him. I didn't think he'd go this far, but I underestimated him. Alec listened intently, his young mind struggling to comprehend the greed and malice that had led to this moment. So he tried to kill you to cover it up? He asked quietly. Victor nodded. Yes. He took me to the bridge, told me it was over, and he pushed me off. He thought I'd drowned. He didn't count on someone like you being there to save me. The weight of Victor's words hung heavy in the air. Mia felt a surge of anger at the thought of someone trying to kill their own family for money, but she knew anger wouldn't solve anything. They needed a plan. We have to report this, Mia said firmly. The police need to know what happened. They can protect you. No, Victor said quickly, his voice rising slightly. Not yet. Alan has connections, powerful ones. If he finds out I'm alive before I can gather the evidence to expose him, he'll come after me again. And this time, he won't fail. Mia frowned. So, what do we do? Just hide you here forever? No, Victor said. I just need a few days to recover and figure out my next move. Once I have a plan, I'll leave and handle this myself. Alec spoke up, his voice hesitant but determined. You're not alone in this. We can help. Mia shot him a sharp look. Alec, this isn't your fight. But I'm already in it, Mom, Alec argued. If we hadn't helped him, he'd be dead right now. We can't just back out now. Victor placed a hand on Alec's shoulder, offering him a small smile. You've done more than enough, kid. I wouldn't be here without you. But your mother's right. This is dangerous. I can't ask you to put yourselves at risk. We're already at risk, Mia muttered, glancing at the locked door. But fine, you can stay here for now. But the second I feel like this is putting Alec in danger, we're calling the police. Agreed? Agreed, Victor said. As the night stretched on, Alec found himself unable to sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying the events of the day. He couldn't shake the image of the black sedan speeding away, or the sound of the splash as Victor hit the water. Somewhere out there, the man who had done this was still free, and he wouldn't stop until he finished what he started. If this tactic were to remain successful again with them out of the way, the plan would continue. Alec got up quietly and crept to the living room, where Victor was resting on the couch. The older man opened his eyes and smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep? Victor asked. Alec shook his head. No, too much on my mind. Victor nodded knowingly. I get it. Days like this, they change you. Alec hesitated, then asked, Do you think Alan knows you survived? Victor's expression darkened. If he doesn't yet, he will soon. Men like him don't leave loose ends. The word sent a chill down Alec's spine. But instead of fear, he felt a spark of resolve. He wasn't just some helpless kid. He had already saved Victor once, and he wasn't about to let Alan win. We'll stop him, Alec said quietly, more to himself than to Victor. We have to. Victor looked at the boy, seeing a glimmer of something he hadn't seen in years. Courage. You've got a good heart, kid, he said. Don't ever lose that. As Alec returned to his room, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was far from over. But for the first time, he didn't feel powerless. He felt ready. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the modest home, but the warmth of its rays did little to ease the tension inside. Alec, still groggy from the restless night, paced the small kitchen as Mia brewed a pot of coffee. The man they had saved, now identified as Victor Rhodes, the missing billionaire, sat upright on the window with a distant expression. Though his body was weak, his mind was beginning to sharpen, and memories of his betrayal were surfacing like shards of glass from beneath dark waters. We can't stay hidden forever, Mia said, breaking the silence as she poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs. Victor, you need to let us call the authorities. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this becomes. Victor shook his head, his voice steady but firm. Not yet. If Alan... He paused, correcting himself. If he knows I'm alive, he'll send more people. And this time, they won't stop until they find me. I need time to secure the evidence, to make sure he can't spin this against me. But we're putting ourselves at risk, Mia argued, glancing at her son. Alec doesn't deserve to be dragged into this. Mom, I already told you, Alec interjected, his tone sharper than usual. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm the one who pulled him out of the river. We can't just leave him to fend for himself. Victor leaned forward, wincing slightly as he adjusted the bandage on his temple. You're brave, Alec, and you have every right to feel that way. But your mom's right. This is dangerous. The kind of people I'm up against, they don't just give up. Alec folded his arms, frustrated but unable to refute Victor's words. The truth was, he didn't fully understand the scope of what they were dealing with. All he knew was that he couldn't stand by and do nothing. Meanwhile, in a sprawling office filled with leather furniture and dark wood paneling, Alan Foster paced like a caged animal. His neatly combed hair was disheveled, and the usual cool confidence he exuded was replaced by a barely contained fury. A sleek laptop sat open on his desk, displaying the latest news reports about Victor's disappearance. "Still no body?" Alan demanded, his voice sharp as a blade. Decker, his enforcer, stood stiffly near the window, his jaw tight. "No, sir. The river search teams haven't turned up anything, but we've got eyes on the nearby neighborhoods. If he's alive, he can't have gone far." Alan slammed his fist on the desk, causing a crystal paperweight to rattle. "If he's alive, Decker, then this whole operation is a failure. Do you understand what's at stake here? If he has any evidence left, we're done. My career, my assets, everything. It's over." Decker hesitated before speaking. "We did spot someone. A boy. Locals say he was near the bridge the night it happened. He might have seen something. We're tracking him now." Alan's eyes narrowed and a slow, menacing smile spread across his face. "Good. Find the boy, and he'll lead us to Victor." Back at the house, Victor sat with a notebook in his lap, scribbling furiously. Mia watched him from the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed. Despite her reservations, she couldn't help but admire his determination. He was clearly a man used to solving problems, even when the odds were stacked against him. "What are you working on?" she asked, her tone softer now. Victor looked up, his expression serious. "I'm piecing together the financial records. I have backups of everything. Offshore accounts, shell companies, falsified invoices. But they're all in my office. If I can get to them, I can prove everything." "That's a big if," Mia said, sitting across from him. "You can't just walk back into your house. It's probably being watched." Victor nodded. "I know. That's why I need help." Mia frowned. "What kind of help?" Before Victor could answer, Alec burst into the room, his face pale. "There's a black car parked down the street. It's been there for an hour, and I saw someone inside with binoculars." Victor and Mia exchanged a tense glance. Victor set the notebook aside and stood, his movements slow but purposeful. "They've found me." Mia grabbed Alec's arm, pulling him close. "We need to call the police, now." "No," Victor said sharply. "Not yet. If we bring the police into this without evidence, Alan will deny everything. He'll paint me as a paranoid old man trying to ruin his reputation. We need to be smart." "Smart doesn't mean getting my son killed," Mia snapped, her voice rising. "Mom, stop," Alec interrupted, his voice trembling. "We've come this far." "Let's hear him out." Victor looked at Alec, then at Mia. "I can leave. If I go now, they'll follow me, and you'll be safe." "You can barely stand," Mia shot back. "If you go out there, they'll kill you." "Then we need a diversion," Alec said suddenly. Both Victor and Mia turned to him, surprised. "If they're watching the house, they'll follow whoever leaves. We can use that to our advantage." Victor's eyes narrowed, a spark of approval flickering in them. "What are you suggesting?" As night fell, the black car remained parked on the street, its occupants waiting patiently. Inside, Decker sat with another man, both of them watching the house through binoculars. "There," Decker said, pointing. The front door opened, and a figure stepped out, wearing a hoodie pulled low over their face. They carried a duffel bag and moved quickly toward the sidewalk. "That's him," Decker said, starting the car. "Let's go." The black sedan rolled down the street, its headlights off to avoid drawing attention. The figure in the hoodie turned a corner, disappearing into the shadows. Decker smirked. They had him. But as the car sped off, the real Victor Rhodes watched from the back window of Mia's house, his expression grim. Alec and Mia stood beside him, their hearts pounding. "Do you think they'll fall for it?" Alec asked. "They don't have a choice," Victor said. "By the time they realize it's a decoy, we'll be gone." Mia looked at him sharply. "What do you mean, we?" "Where are we going?" "To my house," Victor said. "It's the only place where I can get the evidence we need." "No," Mia said immediately. "I'm not letting Alec go with you." Alec stepped forward, his voice steady. "Mom, I have to. He can't do this alone." Mia stared at her son, torn between her fear for his safety and her pride in his courage. Finally she relented, her voice shaking. "Be careful, both of you." The drive to Victor's estate was tense, the silence broken only by the hum of the engine. Alec sat in the passenger seat, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Victor, though visibly exhausted, seemed focused, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. When they arrived, Victor parked a few blocks away to avoid drawing attention. The estate loomed in the distance, its grand facade dark and imposing. Alec stared at it, feeling both awe and apprehension. "We go in, get the documents, and get out," Victor said, his voice low. "No detours, no hesitation." Alec nodded, swallowing his fear. "Got it." They crept through the shadows, avoiding the main gates. Victor led Alec to a side entrance, using a hidden key to unlock the door. Inside, the house was eerily quiet, the air thick with tension. "This way," Victor whispered, leading Alec toward his office. The room was large and meticulously organized, with bookshelves lining the walls and a heavy safe in the corner. Victor moved quickly, entering the combination and pulling out a stack of files and a flash drive. He handed them to Alec. "Hold on to these, they're everything we need." Suddenly, a noise from downstairs made them both freeze. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. "They're here," Victor whispered, his face grim. Alec's heart raced as the footsteps grew louder. Victor grabbed a letter opener from his desk, holding it like a weapon. "Stay behind me." The office door burst open and Decker stepped inside, his expression cold. "Going somewhere, Victor?" Victor's grip on the letter opener tightened. "It's over, Decker. I have the evidence. Alan's finished." Decker smirked. "You won't live long enough to use it." Before he could take another step, Alec hurled a book from the desk, hitting Decker square in the chest. The man stumbled, giving Victor enough time to lunge forward and knock him to the ground. "Run, Alec!" Victor shouted. Alec hesitated for only a second before grabbing the files and flash drive and bolting out the door. He raced through the dark halls, his heart pounding as shouts echoed behind him. He didn't stop until he reached the front door, where Mia was waiting in the car. "Drive!" Alec yelled, jumping into the passenger seat. Mia didn't hesitate, slamming her foot on the gas as the car sped away. Alec looked back, his chest heaving with adrenaline. Victor was still inside, but Alec knew he had done what he could. Just as he expected, the small building seemed to lift off the ground. For now they had the evidence and a fighting chance. The tires screeched as Mia's car sped through the empty streets. Alec twisted in his seat, looking out the back window, his heart racing. In the distance, the faint glow of headlights appeared, growing brighter and closer. "Cross over," Alec shouted, his voice tinged with panic. Mia glanced in the rearview mirror, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Hold on," she said through clenched teeth, pressing the accelerator. The car surged forward, the engine roaring as they weaved through the quiet neighborhood. Go Forge Madison Plaza, more spectacular than ever before. The black SUV closed the distance, its menacing bulk gaining on them with every turn. Mia's mind raced as she calculated their options. The police station was still miles away, and the documents Alec clutched to his chest were their only leverage. "We can't let them catch us," Alec said, his voice trembling but resolute. "Mom, if they get these, it's over." "I know," Mia replied, her voice steely. "I'll get us out of this." As they approached a narrow bridge, Mia made a sharp turn onto a side road, the tires skidding on the gravel. The SUV followed, its headlights flooding the car with blinding light. Mia's jaw tightened as she spotted an abandoned construction site up ahead. "Hold on, Alec," she said, her voice calm but firm. Without warning, she veered off the road and into the construction site, navigating around piles of rubble and half-built structures. The SUV followed, its driver struggling to keep up with Mia's sharp turns and sudden maneuvers. The narrow pathways and uneven terrain worked to Mia's advantage. She zigzagged through the site, forcing the SUV to slow down to avoid crashing into obstacles. Finally, she spotted a narrow alley between two unfinished buildings, just wide enough for her car. "Hold on tight," she yelled, steering the car into the alley. The SUV tried to follow, but its larger size worked against it. With a screech of metal, it became wedged between the buildings, unable to move forward or back. Mia didn't wait to see what happened next. She sped out of the construction site, the SUV's headlights disappearing in the rearview mirror. Alec let out a shaky breath, his hands still clutching the files. That was close. Mia nodded, her own adrenaline still coursing through her veins. We're not out of the woods yet, she said. We need to find somewhere safe to regroup. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Victor was locked in a deadly standoff with Decker. The two men circled each other in the darkened office, the tension thick in the air. Decker's eyes glinted with malice as he lunged forward, his fists swinging. Victor sidestepped the attack, using his smaller size and agility to his advantage. He grabbed a heavy book from the desk and swung it at Decker, catching him off guard. The larger man staggered back, but his recovery was quick. You're out of your league, old man, Decker sneered, pulling a knife from his belt. Victor's eyes narrowed. You underestimate me. As Decker advanced, Victor grabbed a chair and used it as a shield, blocking the knife's slashes. With a well-timed move, he shoved the chair into Decker's chest, knocking him off balance. Seizing the opportunity, Victor grabbed the letter opener from the desk and held it in a defensive stance. You're not leaving this house alive, Decker growled, his voice dripping with venom. Victor didn't respond. Instead, he lunged forward, using the letter opener to disarm Decker. The knife clattered to the floor, and Victor delivered a swift punch to Decker's jaw, sending him sprawling. Breathing heavily, Victor stood over his fallen opponent. He knew he didn't have much time. Decker's reinforcements would arrive soon, and Victor needed to get out of the house. He grabbed a second set of backup documents from the safe and slipped out the side door, disappearing into the night. Back at Mia's house, the atmosphere was tense. She and Alec had returned safely, but were on high alert, unsure if they had truly shaken off their pursuers. Alec sat at the kitchen table, spreading out the files and flash drive Victor had risked everything to retrieve. The papers were a maze of financial records, offshore accounts, and shell companies, all pointing to one undeniable truth. Alan Foster had been embezzling millions for years. This is it, Alec said, his voice filled with awe and dread. This proves everything. Alec studied the photo. Mia leaned over the table, her brow furrowed. Now we just need to figure out how to use it. If we go to the police, we'll need to make sure they can't bury it. Alec nodded, his mind racing. What about the press? If we leak this to a journalist, it'll be public before Alan has a chance to cover it up. Mia hesitated. That's a big risk, Alec. If Alan finds out we're the ones who leaked it, he'll come after us. And Victor. As if on cue, the front door creaked open, and Victor stumbled inside, his face pale and his breathing labored. Alec and Mia rushed to his side, helping him into a chair. Victor, Mia exclaimed. What happened? Are you okay? I'm fine, Victor said between gasps. But Decker won't stop until he finds those documents. We need to move fast. Alec showed Victor the spread of files on the table. We've got everything. It's all here. Offshore accounts, fake invoices, transactions. It's enough to bury Alan. Victor nodded, his expression grim. Good. Then we need to act before he finds us. The plan was set in motion quickly. Victor reached out to an old friend, a trusted journalist named Sarah, who had a reputation for exposing corruption. Mia was initially hesitant to involve someone else, but Victor assured her that Sarah could be trusted. That night, they met Sarah in a secluded diner on the outskirts of town. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, listened intently as Victor explained the situation and handed over the files. Victor nodded. This is explosive, Sarah said, flipping through the documents. If this goes public, Alan Foster won't just lose his career. He'll lose his freedom. That's the idea, Victor said, but you need to be careful. He has resources, and he won't go down without a fight. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. Don't worry, I'll handle this. By tomorrow morning, this will be front-page news. As Sarah left the diner, Victor felt a small weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that justice might actually be within reach. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. News outlets exploded with stories about Alan Foster's embezzlement, the damning evidence laid out for the world to see. Social media buzzed with outrage, and public pressure mounted for authorities to take action. Alan's smug facade cracked as he watched the coverage from his office. His phone rang incessantly, calls from lawyers, associates, and reporters demanding answers. He smashed a glass against the wall, his rage boiling over. "Dacker," he bellowed. "Find Victor. I don't care what it takes. Find him and end this." At Mia's house, Victor, Mia, and Alec watched the news unfold with a mix of relief and apprehension. The evidence was out there, but they knew Alan wouldn't go down without a fight. "This is just the beginning," Victor said, his tone cautious. "Alan will try to spin this to discredit the evidence. We need to be ready." "Ready for what?" Alec asked, his voice filled with determination. "For the backlash," Victor replied. "This isn't over until Alan is behind bars." Later that evening, the police arrived at Alan's estate with a warrant. Officers swarmed the mansion, seizing documents and arresting Alan on charges of embezzlement and attempted murder. Alan's once pristine image was shattered as he was led away in handcuffs, his face pale and his eyes burning with hatred. At Mia's house, Victor allowed himself a rare smile as he watched the footage on TV. Alec grinned beside him, the weight of the past few days finally lifting. "You did it," Alec said. "We did it." Victor placed a hand on Alec's shoulder. "No, kid. You did it. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Mia, standing in the doorway, wiped a tear from her eye. Despite the danger they had faced, she felt a deep sense of pride in her son, and a glimmer of hope for the future. As the dust began to settle, Victor prepared to leave. He had more work to do, more battles to fight, but he knew he couldn't have made it this far without Alec and Mia. "Thank you," he said, his voice heavy with gratitude. "For everything." "You'll always have a place here," Mia said, her voice soft but sincere. Alec nodded, his eyes shining. "Come back and visit, okay?" Victor smiled. "I will." As he walked out the door, the sun setting behind him, Victor felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, he believed that justice would prevail. And Alec, watching him go, knew that he would never be the same. He had faced danger, stood up to fear, and discovered a courage he didn't know he had. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready. The river that had once threatened to take a life had instead forged a bond that would last forever, a bond built on bravery, trust, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. If this story hooked you, there's another one on screen that you'll love. Subscribe to stay updated with all the inspiring, dramatic, and jaw-dropping stories we have in store. Use the hashtag 10lanes to get inspired. Prime member.